we have a little bit of a lull, so I think we'll begin this morning. I do want to welcome you to the District Administration Center and our very first Coffee with the Community for this new school year, 2015-2016 school year. Before we dive into our content this morning, I do want to recognize Kim Marie Graham, who's with us this morning, who's one of our board members. I appreciate her being here today. We know that everyone's schedules are incredibly hectic, but we appreciate your time this morning. I do see a lot of red in the audience. I'm not sure what that's about because our colors are blue. But nonetheless, we're going to go into our content this morning. We have had a phenomenal start to the new year. And we can say that from building to building to building, department to department. And it is truly a testament to our staff and the quality of work that is done on a daily basis throughout our community and throughout our district. It's also a testament to our students and our families. And so as we start this morning, I want to show you this picture here on the screen, and that is at our convocation. Several of you were able to attend that event. And it's where we bring all of our faculty and staff together to really, in an opportunity to kick off the school year. And it's difficult in coming up with something insightful to share with that many people in a crowd like this, in a facility like this, but really we landed on just the concept of purpose, and that we are all positioned for purpose. Whether it's as a parent, whether it's as a student, as a staff person, as a board member, whatever your role in the Liberty Public School community, we are each positioned for purpose. So as we talk this morning, I want you to keep that in mind and certainly look to see what your role is in the work that we do on a daily basis for the life of our kids. And so with that said, as we started the school year, we always want to focus on our mission, vision, and values. And so as it states up top, inspire and equip learners to discover their voice and unlimited potential. Focused on the future with a passion for lifelong learning, and then our values of excellence, integrity, collaboration, innovation, and growth. And so as students started this new school year, we had a lot of excitement. We had some nervous moms who were sending their kindergartners to school for the very first time, but we really have had a great start. We're also celebrating a couple things. Franklin Elementary celebrated their 75th year anniversary last year. I believe Alexander Donovan is celebrating their 50th year. Ridgeview is coming up on their 60th year. So there's a lot to celebrate in addition to Epic's inaugural year, and that they have been around for 1 year now and are seeing a lot of success. We'll talk about that in just a few moments. I want to show you a couple of items. In the month of September that we look to is our enrollment and our count. And as of September 8th, our latest data is that we currently stand at 12,192 students. That is grades pre-K through grade 12. And you can see the distribution in respect to our students throughout our system. Notice at the very bottom, those numbers that show a -2 or -1, that is actually our 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds at our early childhood center. If you factor that out of that total of 12,192, you can see that our K-12 enrollment stands just below, a little bit below 12,000 students. Keep this in mind, and that we're going to talk a little bit as well about our projection toward the future. Additionally, in the month of August, we welcomed around 72 new teachers to our community and to our district. And so they're serving in our schools. They're about a month into school this year. And some were veterans, but some are in it for the very first time. Of those 70 or so individuals, about 18 were actually brought up through the Liberty Public School system. So they went to school here, they live in our community, and we're fortunate enough to get them back and now investing in the lives of our young people. Summer is a busy time, whether it's summer school or whether it's the work that we do with our Board of Education. And I want to share a little bit of the work that we've done over the last several months, and that's in respect to a demographic study, and that we try to conduct a demographic update every couple of years. And we use a group called Applied Economics out of Arizona in conjunction with a group out of the Kansas City area called Land Marketing. And so we worked through this process over the course of the spring into the summer, which culminated into a final report to our Board of Education on August 17th. The demographic study was predicated on these areas: enrollment trends, demographic characteristics in respect to our population in the community and the households, as far as growth, development impacts, and then finally enrollment projections. You can access this document through board docs on our website and take a look at it. We've had a tremendous amount of help from our developers in the area, as well as the City of Liberty, the City of Kansas City, in coming to looking at what our future looks like in Liberty Public Schools. So to tease out a couple of graphs, we have a tremendous amount of data that we look at in the district, and looking at our future, we want to start with our existing conditions. and what our projections have looked like and whether or not we've hit the mark along the way. Keep that number 12,192 in mind that we just looked at in terms of opening school, and that currently, based on our prior projections, here's what those numbers looked like. And so we're pretty close to where we were projecting, in and around that 12,000 mark for grades K through 12. That's the blue bars that you see going up and down in terms of our enrollment from 1991 all the way to 2014, 2015. The red line that you see throughout is the percentage change, and you can see that at a particular point in the early 90s, we were having some pretty significant growth as a school district and community. And then fast forward over the course of the last several years, you can see our economic decline in the nation in and around 2007, 2008, and then we start seeing a slower trend of growth all the way to 2014 and 2015. Nonetheless, we continue to grow as a school district and as a community, whereas a lot of other districts and communities have actually slowed down a little bit, or in fact are losing students. And so we're going to continue to see in the next couple of slides that trajectory hold steady right between 1% to 2% moving forward in around a 10-year window. So a couple things to tease out. Historically, enrollment increases of around 75% since 2000. We've also seen the recession have an impact. We've also seen birth rates have an impact in terms of our future growth. And so we'll look to that in just a moment. Along with our existing conditions, we can also break down our increased enrollment by cohort. When we talk about a cohort, we talk about a grade level as it migrates throughout our system. So if you have children in our community or in our district, in our schools, you may take a look at a third grader and watch them as they track their way through the system from third grade to fourth grade to fifth grade and beyond. That's what we refer to as a cohort when we talk about education jargon. So K2 is represented by the gray line with the squares. You can see 3 through 5 with kind of the blue highlighted line or dashed line with the circle. 6 through 8 is the triangle, and then 9 through 12 is another circle there. And you can see where our populations lie in respect to those grade cohorts. Notice in particular this bubble right here, and that is in reference to our kindergartners and second graders from 2005 in that time frame all the way to 2014 and 15, and what that growth in that particular cohort looked like. And so as you see, that really represents a bubble that is working its way through our system as we speak. And so as they migrate from that particular grade level in respect to K through 2, and they move on from year to year to year, guess where they're getting ready to hit now? They're in that middle level range. And so we're looking at our middle level, but then we're also looking beyond at our high school level, and that we'll continue to see that particular cohort kind of work its way through our system. On the other side of things that's interesting is that as you look at our projections, we take a look at neighborhoods, we take a look at the Kansas City side, we take a look at the city of Liberty. We talk with our developers, and you can actually dive pretty deep into this data, and that there's really a lifespan as it relates to a neighborhood. So as a neighborhood is developed and it comes online, families move in, with that comes a particular age family, but then also particular age children. And then you can watch that neighborhood develop over time as those children age, as they walk their way through K-12, as they enter into college and careers, as the neighborhood ages a little bit. And then you go for a period of time in which that neighborhood kind of is reinvigorated, and now you see houses remodeling, and then new families coming in, and then again that neighborhood is kind of revitalized in terms of children. And so as we look around our community, we can see neighborhoods that are a little dormant or a little stagnant. We can see brand new neighborhoods that are coming online, and we can see other neighborhoods that are really being reinvigorated in terms of seeing new families coming into perhaps what would be an older neighborhood. So with that said, you can see the housing projections all the way through 24, 25, but a couple of key highlights here on the side, and that we're looking to see our housing additions relatively flat over the next year. But keep in mind, we have a tremendous amount of development going on in the Kansas City area, as well as the city of Liberty side, and to where we see an uptick in between the next 10-year period of about 6,000 new units over that next 10-year window. And about a fourth of those will be multi-family dwellings. And in working with our developers and our demographers, we can project, based upon these figures here, how many students will actually come to us out of those new units or out of those neighborhoods that are perhaps being reinvigorated. So the final slide that I want to share with you in respect to our demographic projection takes it and identifies it by school level. And so as you look at our elementaries, you can see their current growth as of 2014-15, and then from year to year to year, all the way to 2024, 2025, and the percentage change in these two columns that we will end up seeing between 2014 and 19, and then 2019 and 2024. So take a look. Your school may be on here. You may see the actual number in which their enrollment sits today or at the end of last year. But then you can also see what the impact will be in and around that time period of 2024, 2025. And so overall, from a district perspective, looking at the very bottom line in terms of grand totals, as of 2014-15, an enrollment of around 11,757, which we know as of our last count on September 8th looked a little bit different, a little bit higher, all the way to 24-25, in which we anticipate being at around 14,650 students district-wide. A couple of elements that you're probably picking up on at the elementary level, you see some schools that grow pretty significantly, and that if they stay as is, for example, a couple here in respect to Lewis and Clark, sitting right at around 600 students, you would anticipate, if nothing were done differently, a larger capacity of 1,074. At the same time at Shoal Creek, increasing to around 1,063. You have a couple of other examples of that as far as Warren Hills at the middle level. You can see the growth that's taking place. While some might actually stay about the same or diminish a little bit, you can see growth at South Valley. You can see anticipated growth at Heritage. You can see Discovery plateauing a little bit or maybe reducing a little bit in terms of their population. And then certainly take a look at the high school populations and where they stand presently, and then what could potentially occur in 2024 and 2025. These are assumptions that are made on everything staying the same. So no additional schools, whether it's an elementary, a middle level, or a high school, no additional renovations or anything like that. This is important data that the board needs and that the board utilizes as it relates to the master planning process. And so we'll talk about that in just a few moments, but this is invaluable information for us, and what we're very pleased about is that it's been pretty accurate as we've worked with applied economics. And so we will continue to look to this data and utilize it to make decisions and make recommendations for our Board of Education in moving toward the future. The other important piece here that I've not shared is that while we look at this information as it relates to buildings or as it relates to the district as a whole, we're also able to tease that out per grade level, per building, which is beneficial for us in making staffing and hiring decisions. So as we decide about new classroom spaces or classroom sizes and ratios and so forth, and who to hire and what positions to fill and so forth, this data is invaluable, and we can tease that all the way out to the building level and the grade level, which then makes hiring decisions and determinations on FTE pretty precise. And so we're looking forward to being able to utilize that this spring in our hiring processes as we gear up for the following year. In addition, we talked briefly about our facilities master plan. And a couple of years back, in around 2013, the district took on a pretty significant retooling of the master plan and spent some time rethinking what learning spaces look like, with a couple of key goals that were identified. The first of which was to try to make maximum use of existing facilities in order to try to provide high quality instruction while at the same time diminish expenditures in terms of the operations piece. Another piece would be to try to reduce the square footage per learner by around 10% by 2020. And then finally, implement new instructional and learning schedules. This time last year, we were providing an update to this group in regard to the elementary construction projects and renovations that had occurred at most of our elementary schools. And we're fortunate to be beyond that. We had a couple of other items that we were trying to button up over the course of this year, one of which was at Liberty High School, and you can see a picture here of some of our board and staff taking a tour of that space. And that we had facility renovations. We also had new construction at Liberty High School. Along with some of these learning spaces that are considered flexible learning spaces, we have the addition of a gymnasium, which has classroom space in there as well. We are very grateful that we're wrapping that construction up, and in fact, it will likely be ready in probably the next week or two in terms of students to begin occupying and utilizing that space. Below, you see an example of a classroom lab, a science lab at Liberty North High School. That project was completed during the summer. Students are occupying that and making use of that space as well. If you've not had an opportunity to visit it in person, you can always go to our website, and that we have a virtual tour that Dr. Jacobs has assisted with and taking staff through via the internet in respect to that learning space. So we're very fortunate to have these spaces for our students, for our staff, and are grateful to our community for the support over the years in making that a possibility. So in reviewing our master plan from 2013, it was really divided up into 3 stages. The first stage, as we mentioned, was kind of the completion of work that had occurred last summer with our elementary campuses, as well as what we're seeing currently with our middle or our high school campuses, both at Liberty North and Liberty High School. You can see the second phase here is a little bit further out in around 2017, 2018, as we take into consideration our growth, our demographic projections, and what our needs will be come 2017, 2018. So we have a lot of work to do in revising our master plan, updating it, and we look to do that again in mid-year sometime this year as we look toward 2017, 2018. That will involve needs assessments at each of our campuses. And by doing that, we'll be able to go into our elementaries, our middle level, and our high schools, assess where they're at in terms of their size, their capacity, available space, and then be able to make recommendations to the Board of Education whether we need a renovation, an addition, a new elementary school, new middle school, whatever the case may be. So more to come in that regard. So the first phase is there. The second phase is captured, and then this third phase below is really captured as supplemental projects and identifying some things that we would like to be able to do. One of which, the first one, is continuing to revise our master plan and being able to focus on that. The second one is looking at the option of field turf at Liberty North as well as Liberty High School, and that those spaces are underutilized currently, in part because of they're needing some help, whether it's turf to be able to bring classrooms outside or PE classes into the exterior to use green space, whether it's incorporating some of our band programs for practices, for performances, whatever the case may be. And we're looking at doing that by generating private funds. And so we're working on a committee currently internally to provide some detail and direction in moving forward with that. Following the third item at the very bottom is additional improvements that might be identified throughout this process as far as our 2 stadiums that we have. We have the one at Liberty High School, we now have a track at Liberty North, and continuing to identify what those needs are and moving forward. So that work has begun with an internal committee that is in the process of having those conversations. To switch gears a little bit, more on the academic side rather than the nuts and bolts as far as demographics and facilities, another key month along with September is the month of October. And I want to put that in your mind, in that October is when we receive from the State Department, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, our annual performance report. We refer to it internally as the APR. October is also important in that Missouri is a little bit in transition right now, or flux for lack of a better word, in that we've gone through the process of developing new Missouri learning standards, which has hit a few bumps along the road in respect to the media attention in and around the Common Core standards. The legislature got involved and actually requested that work groups be put in place to be able to assess the Missouri learning standards and really truly make them Missouri's. And so they're in the process of finalizing those work groups. We anticipate those findings being presented to the State Board of Education sometime in October. In addition, in October, we anticipate seeing our annual performance report. The annual performance report is predicated on these 5 standards that are listed here below and point values that follow. Last year, our district scored 130 out of 140 points. And so we're a very high-performing district, but we certainly still have work to do as it relates to meeting the needs of all of our learners. The first category of academic achievement, subgroup achievement, which are perhaps students that fall into the categories of special needs, English language learners, minority populations, various subgroups as that. College and career readiness, our attendance rate, but then also our graduation rate. I wish I could show you the points earned in this category. We just don't know them just yet, because that will be made available to us a little bit later to provide to the public, probably mid-October. We actually see a preliminary look of that next week, and then we have opportunity to provide updates and change data in the event that we see an error at the state level. So we'll be working through that process over the next couple of weeks. A few things that we can share with you, however, are the results from our MAP assessments and end-of-course performance. These highlights are posted on our website, but again, these highlight some of the items that we feel we can celebrate in terms of our performance. But it's important to note that the administration of MAP assessments and end-of-course exams last spring is really a foundational year for us, and that we transitioned from a prior assessment to a new assessment. So it's really difficult for us to be able to compare how we fared to years prior. Typically, we try to run a series of years and compare our data from anywhere from a 3 to 5 year window. This is really a benchmark year or a baseline year. And so we're looking at that, but we're starting to see how we've done as a district and fared pretty well, as you can see by these highlights here. We have a lot more diving into the data that we have to do as it relates to the individual learner. And that's really where the data is most valuable, to be able to see how students performed, the gains that they made, the growth that occurred from one year to the next. So as a classroom teacher welcomes anywhere from 20 to 25 to 30 students into their classroom at the elementary or middle level, they can assess where they were last year, bring them in August, that's their benchmark or their baseline for their new grade level, and then track their growth from August to May to see what gains were made. That's where data is the most valuable. That's where assessment is the most valuable. You hear a lot about standardized assessment, which has its purpose and its role, but at the same time, the value in assessment is at the level in the classroom in which I can track every single student's growth in real time on any given day and the progress that's being made along the way in whatever content. And so that's the value that we see as a district as it relates to assessment at its most important level, that being the classroom. A couple of other items per content area. As a district, we performed well in each of these areas. Just to clarify, the MAP assessment is provided to 3rd grade through 8th grade students. And so that's the assessment that they took. The end-of-course exams are more related to high school students. And then the final piece we'll talk about here in a moment is in respect to the administration of the ACT to all of our high school juniors. So to put it into a chart, it looks something like this. By grade level, you see the grade levels in the first column. You see the content area that follows in the second column. You see how we fared in terms of our percentages, and you'll note that these are the percentages of students within these levels by district, by the entire district, that performed in the top 2 levels in terms of the top 2 areas, which are proficient and advanced. There are 2 other categories, which are basic and below basic. And so if you see a disparity, rather than 100%, for example, in grade 3, 74% are in the top 2 columns or the top 2 categories of proficient and advanced. So that would imply that there's approximately 26% or so that fell into the basic or below basic. And you'll notice that this is the average of the district in terms of the overall average. When you break it down by elementary, by middle level, or even by the high schools in respect to end-of-course exams, you'll see some of those elementaries exceed that average. Some may come in a little bit below that average. And so while we can't go back and look at our last 5 years' performance in terms of this particular style of assessment, we can take the data and compare it to the state, which is this next level right here, in terms of our performance compared to the state. And then our final column gives us kind of an over or under, depending upon how we fared in comparison to that state average. And you can see consistently throughout, we fare higher than the state average. Another point to clarify, if you see a letter followed by a number perhaps, that is a high school end-of-course exam. So for example, English 2, Algebra 1, which actually takes into account some of our middle level learners that take the Algebra 1 test, whether it's 8th grade or perhaps those that go on and take a little bit later on once they get into high school. You also have Algebra 2, Geometry, Biology 1, and then also Government. Those are the end-of-course exams administered. So this is a little bit of information as to how we fared as compared to the state. We want to take that a step further to really gauge how we fare against our peers. And so we're working on that information, and we'll be delivering that to the board at an October study session. We call that our scorecard, where it factors in not only our academic performance, but then also some of our financial information, some of our demographic information, and comparing to districts not only within the metro area, but similar districts across the state of Missouri. And that you see districts of our size, perhaps, that's an indicator that we utilize, or our level of assessment, or in terms of assessed valuation, along with just our demographics and kind of the composition or the makeup that we have. So we look forward to sharing that scorecard and comparing on a variety of levels as to where we fare. The other important piece is not to only celebrate and elevate the things that we do well, But equally important is to identify the work that continues to be done and identifying those gaps that perhaps we need to focus on this particular area. Perhaps we need to do things differently here. The other thing I want to point out, I don't want to draw too much attention to one individual school, but we have had phenomenal success at Epic Elementary. And you may have seen some coverage yesterday on Fox 4. You may have seen some coverage in the newspapers, the Liberty Tribune. We learned yesterday that Epic Elementary actually scored the 7th highest in terms of elementary schools in the state of Missouri and the performance in these areas that we're talking about. So great things are happening there, but equally, great things are happening at all of our elementary schools. So we want to elevate those successes, those practices, and share them out rather than keep them and guard them to myself as a classroom teacher. Because the only way we can benefit all kids is to collaborate and share one with another for the sake of each individual child. Switching to the ACT, we're excited about this information, which kind of sounds funny because we actually saw a little bit of a decline in our composite score. But hang with me for a second, and that the reason why we saw a little bit of a decline in our composite score over the course of the last several years, and that's generally just our average over that time, is from 2012 to 2013, our district took a very significant step as it relates to the ACT. This is the exciting piece, and that prior to that time, not all kids took the ACT. You would have a pretty high percentage in our community that would take it, but when we put into place the practice in 2013 of all of our high school juniors taking the ACT, we saw a bit of a change. We anticipated a little bit of a decline in our composite score, but we were actually preparing for what happened last spring. In 2015, across the entire state of Missouri, they administered the ACT to all juniors. And so while our composite score dropped a little bit, we actually had a leg up on all of our other districts and the fact that we had taken that step a couple of years prior to that. We only anticipate this number going up in terms of continuing to increase. And so for this year, what we notice is a district composite of 21.5. This number right here, as it relates to the state has not yet made that transition in capturing all juniors that are taking the ACT. So guess what's liable to happen a year from now? What do you think will happen to that number? It will likely decline, and that it stayed fairly consistent. If we can maintain that 21.5, in fact, our goal is to actually increase it. If we can increase that number right there, we should exceed the state average, and that we anticipate that being closer to about a 19 composite on the ACT. Now, that's conjecture, but at the same time, we're seeing what's happening for those districts that have already administered the ACT for a couple of years. Other states have been there longer and have done that for a longer period of time. The purpose in it and the value in it for us is to equip students with the knowledge to be successful in a college or career setting, but at the same time, perhaps challenge those kids that perhaps did not think they were college material and have them have some success on the ACT, and that perhaps they may decide, okay, well, maybe I am cut out for college. And we have testimonies of that, of students who perhaps did not feel they were college ready or college material, and then by doing well on the ACT, counselors connected with them and told them, hey, you can do this, and nonetheless, now they're in college pursuing a variety of things. So, with that said, you can break out the data even a little bit further. I failed to mention this graph down here, but you can break it out by kind of the students who are taking specific college courses and are they ready for college, and you can see the breakdown in terms of the state average compared to the district average as they're taking college English, college algebra, as they're taking other courses in terms of science, the biologies and so forth. Another piece of information that we get from ACT is the course sequence in terms of the series of courses that high school students take, and then how that fares for them in regard to their performance on the ACT. The last item as well is related to that. The top one here is in respect to mathematics. The bottom one is in respect to science. We also get additional information from ACT as far as possible ideas or steps to be taken in terms of increasing our performance on the ACT. So we find this data invaluable as well. I want to wrap up briefly in talking a little bit about our strategic plan. And we've had a little bit of change within our organization in moving away from what we call the executive leadership team now to the strategic leadership team. Previously, under our executive leadership team, we missed a couple of folks that were integral to carrying out the strategic leadership or the strategic plan. By creating the strategic leadership team, what we've done is we've brought everyone to the table that meets every other week. that is responsible for carrying out some of these mission-critical commitments as well as the continuous improvement strategies. To highlight two of our goals, the first goal, as you see here to the left, is that every student will graduate college and career ready. The second goal is every student will develop personal, social, and civic responsibilities, and that we really feel there's dual purpose in why we exist. It's not only to provide the content and preparation for life beyond high school or life beyond K-12, but it's also the value in creating good citizens. And we see the value in that by engaging them through their own personal, social, as well as civic development. Along with that, we have performance targets that you can see and you can read at a later time, but then we funnel through it in terms of these categories of a vertically aligned curriculum, instructional strategies, the personal and social growth piece, future-focused professionals, in looking at partnerships within our community, and then certainly making sure that we are stewards of our resources through fiscal responsibility. I greatly appreciate our strategic leadership team because they are kind of the feet on the ground that makes a lot of these things happen. So we're currently in the process of identifying those areas that we can certainly celebrate and say that we've accomplished, but then we always want to continue to grow and continue to improve. So then capturing perhaps some innovative strategies or identifying some of those gaps through our data that we then need to go in and fill and correct and problem solve around. So it takes a collective effort, whether it's our district administration, whether it's our Board of Education, in garnering their feedback and the work that they do, but certainly it lands with our faculty and staff and connecting with kids, building relationships, but then also the instruction and learning that occurs on a daily basis. So with that said, I will conclude. I do have a couple of announcements of opportunities that are coming up here in the near future, one of which is Project Lead the Way. If you're not familiar with Project Lead the Way, we have integrated Project Lead the Way into our science curriculums grade K through 5. We piloted the program last year at Lewis and Clark Elementary. Took I would say, a relatively bold step in integrating it grades K through 5, and we are excited to showcase that program at an open house that is scheduled for September 29th, so save the date on your calendar. September 29th at Lewis and Clark Elementary between the hours of 9 and 11 a.m. And PLTW has several programs from elementary to middle to high school. The elementary program is called Launch, so we're excited to launch PLTW Launch. And in fact, we'll have some of our national office organizational people there from PLTW to be with us and celebrate that opportunity. So you are all invited to that event. Have a few postcards here if you're interested. On the communications front, please be sure and continue to collect the educator. This was our first version of it this year, and continue to be pushing this out through our communications department as the year progresses. In addition, working to provide information through other media resources, and that being the Liberty Tribune, and having a series of articles that are shared and presented out through that. Upcoming coffees with the community. In October, we will continue this series, and so October 15th is our next event. That will actually be hosted by the Liberty Alliance for Youth and the partnership that we have with them in serving our children. And our presenter will be Kendra Calloway, and that is October 15th. In November, we'll have our next Coffee with Community on November 19th. The topic will be digital safety and security with our new Director of Safety and Security, Gary Majors. And then finally in December, we'll wrap up our semester with a topic on digital transformation presented by Trey Katzer and his staff from our technology department. So thank you all again for being here this morning. Would certainly open it up at this time for any questions that anyone may have. Any questions from the group? Yes, sir.
With the success at Epic, how have we been able to roll the strategies at Epic out to the district?
Great question. In terms of growing it or scaling out, that's what people always ask, and what does that look like? And as we've talked as a leadership team and as a Board of Education, there's no template that you can come in and put in place, whether it's in an organization or in a school system, that says, here is your process of scaling out. And so as we wrapped our head around that over the course of the last year, it started with opening its doors, and that you really don't know what it's about unless you go in and see. And so there are a lot of things that are elevated and highlighted out of Epic, but if there's one thing, it's personalization. And so personalization is what we talked about earlier, of being able to look at data in real time at each individual child level and see those that are exceeding expectation, maybe right on par as to where they need to be, and then also those that are perhaps struggling, and then coupling with those struggling learners the interventions that need to occur, whether it's in English language arts or whether it's mathematics, science, whatever the case may be. So what we are seeing now, by opening its doors over the course of last year, we were very intentional about inviting each of our elementary, our middle, our high school level into the building to be able to see the work that's being done. So you can walk into almost every building in our district now and see some of these innovations and strategies in place. Some of them already had them in place, but you see examples of team teaching in place in other buildings now. You see the data use as it relates to personalization. You see project-based learning. You see inquiry-based learning. And so it's growing organically, but it's continuing to gain momentum, and so we're wanting to be certain that as a district administration, we provide the level of support that those staff need at the other facilities, at the other schools, to be able to continue those desires and efforts that we've put in place with EPIC. So it's really exciting, and I think you'll see more to come. Yes, ma'am.
2 questions.
You bet.
With EPIC, are their class sizes the same as all of the other elementaries, or are they smaller?
They are actually larger.
Really?
Yeah, but there's a bit of a trade-off in that what you see grades K through 5 are classrooms that have 50 students in them, which sounds overwhelming, but the good thing about that is I'm partnered with a teacher if I'm teaching over there. So Mr. Peterson and I might have a classroom of 50 students, but we're tag teaming, and that you have multiple personalities, you have different strengths, not multiple personalities, but you have 2 personalities perhaps. But what you end up with is different strengths in that, you know, maybe he is solid in math, maybe I'm an English language arts person, and together we make a great team. And so what you see perhaps at the kindergarten level where you want those numbers to be lower, 25 is getting pretty large in a kindergarten classroom. By bringing 50 kids in together, it works. There are days that are challenging, but you've got 2 staff people that are almost as tight as husband and wife, quite honestly, and that they spend a tremendous amount of time together in working in that collaborative setting. And so what you see from grades K through 5 are 50, 50, 50, 50, 50 classroom sizes with a little bit larger space, with flexible spaces as well. You had a second question.
Yes. The developers that are building all of these new homes and everything.
Yes.
What are they anticipating, or what are you anticipating from them? I was just at a builders meeting, well, it's been a year now, and
Yeah.
they were talking about they already know they're going to have to bring in a new elementary if they are able to get this new area happening.
Yeah.
So is that part of what you guys, are you involved in that?
Absolutely.
With all the data you have?
Yeah, it really is about communication with all of our developers. And so we were very intentional with our demographic update of reaching out to our developers just to see exactly where they are and how far out their plans are. And so, you know, you have some that are immediately going to come online that are smaller in scale. You have some larger developments in our area that will phase in over time, so in a 15 to 20 year window until they're fully developed. So one in and around Liberty North High School. You have some development going in and around Kellybrook Elementary. There's a lot of work being done on 152 as it relates to commercial and other areas in and around our community. And I want to give a shout out to Mark, who's here in the crowd from the Liberty Economic Development Council, and that he has been a huge resource, and in fact yesterday hosted a showcase of the work that they're doing. And it brought together all of the developers in the same room, in which you were able to walk from station to station to station. I want to say there was probably 8 or so developers present in the projects that we have going on throughout our community, particularly on the Liberty side. So without that relationship that we have with our community partners and that we have with our developers, it would be incredibly difficult to project forward like we just did. But we're fortunate for that. And then as far as the speculation on what the needs will be in the district, as we look to 2017, 2018, continuing to monitor that and then plan from that point as to, okay, we really feel our numbers are telling us we need to have an additional elementary school or a middle level or an extension to the high school, depending upon what those projections look like. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it, but certainly a lot of meetings and a lot of communication. Great questions. Yes, sir.
One thing in your snapshot I didn't see was your perspective on faculty development and maybe where strengths are or weaknesses are.
You bet.
Particularly with all the transformation and change we've done with technology. So.
Yeah, that is critical, and that's captured in our strategic plan and a huge focus there. And I think first and foremost, we can talk about professional growth, professional learning, but I do think you need to focus first on the relationship piece. And so it starts with effective relationships, whether it's a kindergartner or a high schooler. I can tell you stories of high schoolers that I've connected with who have their own entrepreneurial business on the side, and no one was aware of that. Student walks into a classroom, worn out, beaten down, puts their head on the table, and you would think that they're not engaged, when in reality, they're incredibly engaged. It just so happens it's in the middle of the night, communicating with England on a business that they're running during the course of the week. And so without having that relationship, there's absolutely no way you would know what each individual child's interests are, let alone be equipped in meeting those interests. And so from a professional development standpoint, whether it is the personalization, the project-based learning, whether it is classroom management and how to deal with discipline, we have an array of menu options, so to speak, that we provide. On the technology piece, that's critically important, and we made the decision several years ago as we moved into one-to-one, whether it was at the high school level first and then rolling it into the elementary and now grades K through 2, that we needed to provide the support. You can't provide a teacher with a set of classroom devices or individual student devices without sharing with them how to utilize it. And so we had specific professional development training, but then we coupled it with individual staff assigned to the responsibility of growing our teachers in instructional technology. So we have staff that are dedicated at each of our levels, elementary, middle level, and high school level. The important piece there is to note that will evolve. And so that you can put together a professional development plan today, carry it out for this year, and then the needs for next year change because the technology iterates and really cycles up so quickly. So we constantly have to be reminded of that, and that our kids are doing things today that we didn't even think about when we were in school. So just imagine 10, 15, 20 years from now what our classrooms will look like and what our teachers will be doing and the skills that we will need to equip our teachers with. So great question. I did want to make another recognition. Representative King joined us this morning, and I appreciate him being here. He and I have had a number of conversations over the course of the last year and a half or so as he's transitioned into the legislature and certainly as I've transitioned into my role as superintendent. So I think you had a question as well.
I do. Your goal is to have all students graduate college and career ready. Is the word career tied specifically to college only, or do you have a relationship with the trades, and if so, what is that?
Great question. That's actually right in the wheelhouse, Representative King, in that we do a tremendous amount of work with our business partners. And the business partnerships are invaluable for a couple of reasons. It allows our students, whether it's an early level or an older level child, to be exposed to the types of opportunities that are out there. And I'll give you a quick example of this. We were able to tour Magna earlier this week, and several of us from the community, city leaders, the governor was actually in town, and Magna's in our backyard. It's in our industrial development park at Heartland Meadows. And what we found were that they have technologies that we can't even wrap our head around. We see it on TV sometimes in movies and commercials and things like that, but in that facility alone, they have 400 robotic arms that work specifically on developing the undercarriages for 2 automotive brands. One is through Ford in the undercarriage for, I believe it's the Transit van. The other one is through General Motors with the undercarriage of the Malibu. Now that's a long segue to tell you that we have kids engaged in Magna in and around industrial manufacturing, and that we don't teach that in school. And so by being able to expose kids to those opportunities, they may realize that they can slide from high school into a career opportunity like that with very minimal training, particularly those that are going through internship experiences right now, and Magna is supporting them through their own professional learning and development. But then at the same time, you may have a student that gets into those types of settings and realizes, okay, there is value in going and getting an advanced degree in engineering or whatever the case may be, and so they may do one of 2 things. They may go the career path and dive right into one of those positions, or they may go on to college and be able to, develop their learning further and, get a little bit more education and then come back into a similar setting. We have myriad of opportunities and examples throughout our community, not only in Liberty and Kansas City, the Northland, but throughout the metro area, of being able to connect with kids, plug them into where their interests are, and be able to, at the end of the day, have them assess, yeah, I think this is something I want to pursue, or I gave it the old try, but I want to do something completely different. And so to the representative's point, 2 things. Some may be college ready, others may be career ready. And so as we realize our students are all different, we need to try to develop them and grow them in whatever path they want to pursue, because our end desire is for them to be successful adults, successful families, mothers, fathers, citizens. So, great question. Any other questions? Thank you all very much for being here. We'll turn it over to Dallas Ackerman.
I just wanted to make one quick little clarification on your hard copy schedule, and this has been made on our website, but we have a date flip for our next two meetings. The next month, which will be October 15th, that will be district safety and security with Gary Majors. And so as Jeremy was reading that earlier, I could tell Gary was going, Dallas lied to me on the date. So Gary will be our feature presentation next month, and then Liberty Alliance for Youth with Kendrick Calloway will be the month following on November 9th.
Great.
So, and as always, the other key piece is you will notice our second semester dates have not been finalized yet. We love input. You guys are an engaged group. If you ever have an idea that you would like to pass along, our contact information is easily accessible on the website. Many of you have my contact info, and we'll be happy to add that to the list of possibilities. So let's give Dr. Tucker a round of applause for this presentation.
Thank you all. Thanks.
As we wrap up, a reminder that this is available, will be available on our